All right, we are live on YouTube, and let me just record on Zoom and we'll be good to go. All right, so where is everybody Zooming from? If you want to let me know in the comments, feel free. We have someone from let's see, let's check the chat out. So I think NC from Canada. We got Rose from Maryland. All right, very good. And we have Geo from Indiana. All right, so let me, and so Drina from Las Vegas, good old Las Vegas, Nevada. All right, so let me do this before we get into Q&A, just quickly. Not going to do a presentation tonight. We're just going to do Q&A, but just for those, I didn't do this last time. I did this last Saturday, and when I did this in the spring, I did a bunch of these, and I would just warn people who are new to Zoom that they could change their name by clicking on the 3 dots if you don't want your name to display. And again, of course, the Graves' disease and Hashimoto's chat. So just, we're muting everybody, even though every now and then there'll be a stray person who now gets unmuted, which looks like it's happened now. But so everyone muted to keep background noise down. We're pretty much going to use the chat feature for Zoom as well as YouTube. And let me see if I can mute whoever is unmuted here.
Rehab centers to have these people out.
All right, there we go. All right, and then of course I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. So kind of good and bad news. We don't have as many people as on Saturday. Saturday I didn't get to all questions, so maybe right now we're up to 20 in Zoom. I'm not sure how many on YouTube, but I'll go back and forth between YouTube and Zoom, starting with Zoom, and then again, just try to make the question short and to the point, and just keep in mind I can't give specific recommendations. Like I can't tell someone to, if you're taking methimazole, like antithyroid medication, to like stop taking something or to take a specific dose of something. So I could give like general ideas, and then when I say I'm going to try my best to diversify, that means I'll just try to get to everybody at least once. That's what I did on Saturday. I don't know if I succeeded. I don't think I did, but just because there was so many questions, but I try to get to answer at least one question from everybody, and maybe multiple, because again, we don't have as many people on as we did on Saturday. And let me see what YouTube. Okay, actually, oh, there we go. I just need to. All right, and then we have a few people on YouTube here. Let's see, we have Jean Marie from San Francisco Bay Area in California, Shelly Long from South Carolina, and then Billy from Brooklyn, Desiree from Indiana, and Marietta from Alabama. Is it Walumpka, Alabama? All right, and there's already some questions, so feel free to type in your questions. We're going to be getting to them in just a minute. And all right, and then just a couple of announcements, and then we'll get to questions. Or really one announcement. So on November 2nd, I'll be hosting a 21-day challenge in overcoming Graves' disease and Hashimoto's. And I had a couple of challenges this year. Well, I've had 3 of them, but 2 longer ones. So one was in April, and that's similar to the one we're going to be doing in November. And then we had one in June. And then we had a shorter one, a 5-day one in August. But this, I think, will be the last one for this year. And Yeah. Anyway, so just watch your email for more information. I don't have any registration email, any registration information yet. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions, and someone else unmute themselves somehow. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead. I'll go back and forth again between Zoom and YouTube. So just go ahead and type your questions in and let me get to the chat. All right. All right, so Rose, can you please explain the relationship between a gut microbiome and Hashimoto's? So kind of a general question. I'm not sure what exactly. I mean, you need most of the immune system cells are located in the gut. So you do need a healthy gut to have a, to have a healthy immune system. And when it comes to the microbes in the gut, diversity is important. Everybody has, I think it's like, I mean, we have trillions of bugs in our gut, but as far as like species, and I think we have I think 150 specific strains, and everybody differs when it comes to the different strains. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we actually do go into greater detail with the challenge, but I'm not sure. Like I said, I'll try to, if you could be more specific, because the goal here isn't to spend like 20 minutes talk about the gut microbiome and Hashimoto's. I mean, if you have an increase in intestinal permeability, which is the medical term for a leaky gut, that is part of the triad of autoimmunity, which can be so if you have a leaky gut, that's a factor with autoimmune conditions, both Graves and Hashimoto's. But then you could have dysbiosis, where you have too much, we could have some harmful bacteria, or yeast overgrowth, opportunistic bacteria, and yeast is opportunistic too. You're supposed to have some yeast, but so an imbalance of the gut flora. But again, if you want to get a little bit more specific, I don't know if you're asking if like the gut microbiome, like a disruption of the gut microbiome can cause Hashimoto's. It could definitely be a factor. I don't know why people are unmuting themselves. That's kind of weird. This usually doesn't happen, but all right, sorry about that. So all right, so NC here, diagnosed with Graves in 2013 and been on Tapazole since, which is a type of antithyroid medication. So I recently did Cyrix Labs Array 12, and the only thing that showed up was high levels of HSV 6 infections. So Cyrix Labs Array 12, that's a pathogen test, infections test. Do you have any experience with patients who have HSV 6 infections as a precursor to Graves? What do you recommend for this? So when it comes to virus, so HSV 6, that's a virus. And so a few different things. So I love Cyrix Labs, but their array number 12 isn't, I wouldn't rely on that for all infections, so like, for example, with Epstein-Barr, I don't even know, either it doesn't test for Epstein-Barr, which of course could be a really big culprit for Graves and Hashimoto's, or it only tests for one of the markers. I can't say I do that test a lot, but I have done it, and so I am familiar with the test. And again, it either tests for, like I said, there's what Epstein-Barr, like 3 IgG markers you want to look for, and I don't know if it tests for any of them, but if it does, it just tests for one of them. So I wouldn't rely on that. And same thing with, it looks at Borrelia burgdorferi, which is associated with Lyme, but maybe like one or two co-infections. But, then it looks at like Blastocystis hominis, which is a parasite, which ideally you want to look at in the stool. So just H. pylori, I think it looks at, but it's the antibodies associated with H. pylori. So yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad test to look at. It's an okay overall test, but if it's just showing HSV, so to answer your question though, like, so I just wanted to let you know, don't just rely on that, just if that's the only thing it showed. But probably the number one virus can also be potentially a trigger. The literature actually shows with cytomegalovirus more of a factor with like subacute thyroiditis. As far as simplex, 1 and 2 in the literature seems more associated, but again, with Hashimoto's more than with Graves' disease. And just because it's not in the research and the literature doesn't mean it can't be a potential trigger. But just also when it comes to viruses, just remember that we all have, like everybody has viruses in their body. 90% of the people have Epstein-Barr. So I look at it more as an immune problem than an infection problem when it comes to viruses, just because we all have them. So you want to do things to improve immune system health. And there was some of you actually on YouTube, if you're not on Facebook, I know some people here aren't on Facebook. That's why I'm doing this, just because I do Facebook Lives, but I'm also doing some Zoom calls for those who are not on Facebook. And so I did an interview with Dr. Kasia Kynes. This was 3 weeks ago. She's the author of a book on Epstein-Barr. So it's on Facebook, but if you're not on Facebook, it's also on my YouTube channel, which is Natural Thyroid Doctor. So check that out. Even though the question is HSV6, the goal is really this, with different viruses. I mean, sometimes we'll put someone on an antiviral protocol and we might get more specific, but overall, at least initially, the goal is to try to, find the underlying imbalances that are dragging down the immune system, of course, find and remove triggers. And someone else unmuted themselves. Give me a sec there. Yeah, so again, I can't say I see a clear correlation between HSV6 and Graves. But like I said, even with Epstein-Barr in the literature can potentially be a trigger for Graves, but most of us have Epstein-Barr's, and it's not a trigger of autoimmunity in everybody. So like I said, really the goal is to try to improve immune system health to get these viruses in a more in a dormant state. All right. So let's see. So Olga, is Graves something I must live with for the rest of my life, or can it be cured without surgery? So, I mean, with Graves as well as Hashimoto's, I'm not a big fan of using the word cure. I mean, years ago I would, and I've been in remission since 2009. I was diagnosed in 2008, remission since 2009. So I've been about 11 years. And I like to think I'm cured, and maybe I am cured, but there is a genetic predisposition for Graves and Hashimoto. So, if I were to really fall off the wagon, I mean, I definitely haven't been perfect since 2011. But if I was really bad for a prolonged period of time, then there's the potential for relapse. But yeah, Olga, to answer your question, surgery is not the only answer, or else I wouldn't be having this call. I mean, I wouldn't have my website. I wouldn't be doing what I do. So, not to say there's not a time and place for surgery in some cases, but in many cases, sorry, let's zoom. So in many cases, yeah, actually in most cases, people don't need what Graves radioactive iodine thyroid surgery, but like I said, there are exceptions. And so I would definitely, what I would recommend is try to do things to, find and remove triggers, heal the gut. I mean, try to do everything you can to address the underlying cause, because most endocrinologists will, pretty much recommend antithyroid medication, radioactive iodine, or thyroid surgery. Those are really the main options or the only options that most endocrinologists give. And if all someone does is take the antithyroid medication, they might get into remission, but usually first of all, it's a low chance, I think like 30%. And then those who do get into remission, it's usually temporary because the cause of the condition wasn't addressed. All right, so I'm going to get to like 1 or 2 questions on Zoom. Then we're going to go to YouTube. And then again, I'll go back. I'm going to go to until at least 9:30, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how many questions, but not too much longer. Just, I don't want to go to sleep too late. I want to try to practice what I preach to some extent. So So Jessica, if Hashimoto's that was previously in remission or at least going towards remission, so the person was feeling healthy, for some reason, if it reverses and the person's thyroid functions worse, can that in conjunction with low blood sugar cause a rapid heart rate even as high as in the 190 beats per minute? All right, so Hashimoto's was in remission or almost towards remission. So, and the person was feeling healthy, and then they relapsed, and then, and then combined with low blood sugar causing a rapid heart. I mean, typically low blood sugar is not going to cause a heart rate of 190 beats per minute. So with yeah, so with sorry, just again, just Zoom people. Yeah, I'm not sure why this didn't happen on Saturday. Like every minute, someone will somehow figure out. Let me look at the settings here if there's a way. Because this is, I feel really bad. Let me just stop the screen share because we really don't need that anymore. Let me just. All right, so hopefully that did it. I just, again, I mean, I thought everybody was muted, so, but, and yeah, and without the ability to unmute themselves, but again, apparently not. So hopefully that fixes the problem. But all right, let me bring up the chat again, that question. So yeah, so again, this person was in remission or close to remission, then kind of relapsed, and then also has low blood sugar, and saying, I mean, that, I mean, hypoglycemia could get elevated heart rate, but 190 beats per minute is, I mean, it's unlikely, unusual, definitely. So I would look into other things. I mean, also there's, Hashimoto'S. I mean, there's a number of things that could cause elevated heart rate. I mean, elevated thyroid hormone levels. So someone could have Hashimoto'S, which is, hyperthyroidism associated with Hashimoto's, adrenals, high cortisol levels, even though it usually won't increase cortisol to 190, to that high, that elevated. So my guess is it's not just blood sugar that's a factor. Okay, so anything you could recommend for hot flashes? Yeah, so with hot flashes, I mean, so a few things. One, it could be, like typically when we think of hot flashes, we're thinking of hormone imbalances, especially as women get to hit perimenopause and postmenopause, and changes in the estrogen levels. But then also got to keep in mind some people with Graves' disease, feel like they're having hot flashes just because of the increased metabolism. So if that's the case, I mean, lowering thyroid hormone levels, balancing the thyroid hormone levels is important. And then with hot flashes, so the initial focus should be on adrenals. I mean, you need healthy sex hormones to have health. I mean, you need healthy adrenals to have healthy sex hormones. Now, if someone is in postmenopause, they're not going to have sex hormones, of a 20 or 30-year-old, but still, they should have it within a certain range, a postmenopausal range. And if it's not, again, yeah, maybe woman will need to take bioidentical hormones, but many don't. So, I would initially focus on improving adrenal health. Usually, and what I do, I like doing an adrenal saliva test or dried urine test. Also, I do have an article. It's a few years old, but if you visit my website, naturalendocrinesolutions.com, and you could just do a search for hot flashes. You could also, and that one I talk about adrenals, but I also talk, about more about the sex hormones. But again, you always want to start with adrenals. All right, so I'm going to answer this question from Chris, and then I'm going to go to YouTube. But like I said, I'll go back to Zoom. So Chris said, I reduced my Graves antibodies to nothing but going gluten and dairy free. Oh, by going gluten and dairy free, and got rid of, I guess, your meds. I've maintained gluten free, but have been eating dairy. I maintain gluten free, but concerned things may be shifting. Could it be from eating dairy? I mean, it's possible. Dairy cross-reacts with gluten. So, I mean, I can't say I've been dairy-free since 2011, but everybody's different. I mean, 2000, 2009, 11 years. I can't say, I'm completely dairy-free. But just, kind of like with you, I was, avoided gluten, dairy-free. I mean, I was pretty much almost not quite. Yeah. Anyway, a long story, but I was very strict with the diet, more so than just gluten and dairy free. But while getting to remission, and but again, I introduced dairy, and I have it occasionally, and I do okay. Not drinking cow's milk or anything like that, but sometimes some cheese, and I guess that's, yeah. I mean, So there's other sources, but again, I'm not a big dairy person. But yeah, so it's possible. I mean, it could be something else. I guess it depends on also how long you've been in remission for, or how long the antibodies have been normal. If it's been, if it was like, let's say a year and then you reintroduce dairy, then I would say it's a decent chance it's a culprit. But, if it's just been a few months and then you reintroduce dairy, I mean, it could be, but there could be, the food is one potential trigger of Hashimoto's and Graves', but there are other factors too. Stress is a factor, chemicals, infections. So there could have been something underlying, or could be something underlying that wasn't addressed. But yeah, I would say the easiest thing might be to just cut out dairy. You might as well go dairy free for, like, let's say, a month or so, and then see, even a couple of months, and see how you're feeling, retest the antibodies, retest the thyroid panel and the antibodies. And, if things are looking, if things head back in a good direction, then very well dairy might be the culprit. But yeah, dairy potential out of food triggers, gluten, dairy, and corn are three big ones. So let's go over to YouTube. Okay, we got some type of spam going on. How do I get rid of this person here? Sorry, YouTube, which I also never experienced. Okay, sorry, someone was like spamming YouTube, so I had to like delete the messages and hide that person. All right, so let's see. So freedom, our hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's the same. So no, I mean, so Hashimoto's is an autoimmune thyroid condition that typically involves hypothyroidism. A lot of times it's subclinical hypothyroidism. So if someone has elevated TSH and, let's say, elevated thyroid peroxidase and or elevated thyroid globulin antibodies, then that's diagnostic of Hashimoto's. But I mean, their thyroid hormone levels, like free T3, free T4, both could be within range. A lot of times it's within the lab range, but outside the optimal range. But there could be, someone could have hypothyroidism that's not autoimmune, like congenital hypothyroidism, or hypothyroidism due to other causes. So no, Hashimoto's is specifically autoimmune. Okay, and then Julie, can chronic pain bring on Graves' or hyperthyroidism? I mean, it is a stressor. So it is, it's not just emotional stressors, mental stressors, but physical stressors, possibly, potentially. Again, I can't, in the literature, I can't say it's common. And same thing with my patients. I can't say, most people, when they talk about stress, and in my case, my adrenals were in pretty bad shape when I was dealing with Graves', but, I wasn't dealing with chronic pain. But I mean, chronic pain will lead to stress typically, and so it is a possibility, especially if you've been dealing with it for a long time. Another factor is what's been causing the chronic pain. So if someone has, an infection, like a hidden infection or a stealth infection causing the pain, well, maybe it's a stealth infection also that, is causing the hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease. All right, so corporate and cultured. What are the best natural options you'd recommend for Graves? So, um, I mean, typically, again, it's kind of a general question, and definitely would check out my book, Natural Treatment Solutions for Hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, as well as my website. But diet, lifestyle is very important. I usually recommend, I'm conservative with testing, but I do recommend testing to try to find triggers and underlying imbalances. And then based on those triggers and underlying imbalances, we'll give recommendations, dietary recommendations, like some more specific dietary recommendations, supplements, Chinese medicine like herbs, sometimes homeopathy, but homeopathy is more recent. I was always very skeptical of homeopathy, but just over the last few years, but it depends. Most of the time I'm using, again, nutrition, diet, lifestyle, nutritional supplements. So yeah, so I'm not sure if that answers your question. I mean, again, for more specifics, definitely check out my book, my website. Okay, Shelly, naproxen can bring on hyperthyroidism, was told that. All right, Patricia, what is your best advice on how to lower cortisol levels? I have Graves. The test shows I have high cortisol. I often wake up at night when sleeping. Thank you. Yeah, Patricia, a lot of people do have low cortisol. I mean, when I was dealing with Graves, I had depressed cortisol levels, but high cortisol, elevated cortisol levels are common as well. And I mean, one of the best things you can do is block out time for stress management. So, I mean, there are supplements, but we could talk about a few of the supplements that might help, but I would, make sure you just, again, diet, blocking out time for stress management every day, preferably. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes per day. Start out with 5 minutes, get in the routine, so that's some, those two are really big. Maybe even before going to bed, practice some mind body medicine. So, yoga, meditation, deep breathing, biofeedback. Just pick something that you're willing to do on a regular basis. I mean, preferably something that you enjoy doing, but yeah, just choose something and get rolling. As far as supplements, ashwagandha is really good. It is part of the nightshade family. So if someone's following a very strict autoimmune paleo diet, they might choose not to take ashwagandha, but ashwagandha could help. And phosphatidylserine also is something that could help with high cortisol as well. And Relora is another something else. So something, sometimes if someone wakes up in the middle of the night, we'll have them take something before going to bed, like let's say phosphatidylserine, and then or ashwagandha, and then they wake up in the middle of the night, same thing. We'll, have them, if it's a habit where they know they're going to get up and they're not going to fall asleep, we might have them do that. But again, obviously don't want to rely on supplements, but sometimes we're just trying to like break that cycle, lower cortisol, get and blood sugar is important too. Like waking up in the middle of the night, definitely cortisol could be a factor, but just also just make sure you're not eating, later at night. And of course, you want to eat a healthy diet as well. All right, Kathy, hi from Toledo, Ohio. Hello, Kathy. All right, so Shelley, does the cardiac effects of Graves increase the chances of getting COVID-19 or worsen it? All right, I wouldn't say the cardiac effects. So check out, I don't know if you saw and if you're asking a question but I mean, coincidentally, I wrote an art, maybe it's not coincidence. Again, maybe you saw it and you're asking this based on this, but last Thursday, a week from today, if you check out my website, again, naturalendocrinesolutions.com, I actually wrote an updated blog post on COVID and thyroid health. And again, not really getting into anything controversial as far as, not talking about like masks and social distancing and all that, but just talk. There's actually some research now on COVID and thyroid health. And so when COVID first hit, one of the questions I would get that was a common question is, am I more susceptible to getting COVID, having, like Graves or Hashimoto's? And I honestly didn't know the answer. I know different at that time, like comorbidities, like, obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure were known, but there wasn't really anything out on thyroid. But there now is research showing that the research does show increased risk. Now, again, it's not really the cardiac effects of Graves, but just having, the condition itself might increase the risk of, getting COVID. And then also I wrote how having, like COVID can cause subacute thyroiditis, causing hyperthyroidism. Again, not Graves' disease. So there was nothing showing, I mean, doesn't mean that it can't be a factor, but nothing in the research shows that COVID could be a trigger for Graves or Hashimoto's. But if someone has Graves or Hashimoto's, the research shows they, can be more susceptible to COVID. So definitely check that out. All right, so Julie says, thanks for answering, you're welcome. And corporate and culture, you're welcome. So, all right, well, let's go back to Zoom and get to some more Zoom questions. Oh, Shelly, I will go back and read it. Thanks. Okay, so maybe you did read it, but yeah. So yeah, definitely. I mean, check out. I provided links to the study, so definitely check out the studies. And all right, so let's get to the chat here. Let me just take a quick sip of water here. Oh, boy. Okay, actually, I think I answered. Let me just see. The challenge is trying to remember who answered a question, because I'm almost, I don't think I'll be getting to every single question here. So I want to try to get to everybody at least once. So I answered already a question from this person. And then Laurie, I don't think I answered a question from you, but I'm not sure. You said, what about if you have estrogen dominance? Are you asking, like, how do you treat estrogen dominance? I mean, estrogen dominance, you could have high estrogen, but also if you have normal estrogen and low progesterone. And, I've written about, that as well, like doing things to increase estrogen metabolism. And then again, if someone has like a relative estrogen dominance where they have normal estrogen but low progesterone, that's usually an adrenal problem, so improving adrenal health. But if someone has actually elevated estrogen levels, and doing things to increase estrogen metabolism. So from a food source like broccoli, and actually broccoli sprouts are really good, for estrogen metabolism. So I would recommend, just maybe having half a cup to a cup of broccoli sprouts per day. There's diindole methane, or DIM, that could also support. A lot of practitioners will recommend that. And but again, try to do, of course, as much through food if you can tolerate broccoli. Some people can't, for different reasons. But and again, some will say, well, if it's a goitrogen, so I'm not, when I say tolerate, I'm not concerned about it inhibiting thyroid function. But if someone has like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, some people might not be able to. They might be symptomatic when eating broccoli, but broccoli sprouts, other cruciferous vegetables too, not just broccoli. And like I said, diindole methane is really good. I mean, calcium D-glucarate also can help, but I would say maybe if you're going to choose one supplement, I would say DIM. But then again, make sure if you can, the broccoli sprouts are really good. All right, so Carol, what test do you recommend for the beginner who's had previous symptoms of extreme fatigue for years, but finally just through a low TSH? Doc just ordered and cascade only. I want testing for antibodies, etc. So for a beginner with extreme fatigue for years, I mean, obviously you want to do my guess is you've had the basic tests, such as a CBC with differential, complete blood count with differential, comprehensive metabolic panel, CRP, but I would say, I mean, definitely look at adrenals, do again, either an adrenal saliva test or, dried urine testing. And, you might still want to look at Epstein-Barr again. And sometimes you'll have to treat the Epstein-Barr. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes, again, more, you got to definitely address things that are affecting immune system. But again, when extreme fatigue, so I mean, your TSH is low, so I don't know if you have I mean, that's typically associated with hyperthyroidism. I was going to say low thyroid could cause fatigue, but you're saying low TSH, not low thyroid hormone levels. But again, adrenals, nutrient deficiencies. So look, things like iron, like a full iron panel, serum iron, iron saturation. Um, so iron saturation, TIBC, which is total iron binding capacity, ferritin, look at B12. And I mean, all the nutrients are important, but, again, infections could be also a factor, but maybe start out with a CBC. And again, maybe, viruses like Epstein-Barr, but at the very least, sometimes you could get information from the CBC and kind of get an idea if the white blood cell count is low or lymphocytes are high, that could indicate, some type of infection as well. I mean, there could be other things too. If someone has a higher toxic load, like there's a enzyme that you could do on a blood test, GGT, which relates to the liver. Many are familiar with the liver enzymes, AST, ALT, but GGT a lot of times is overlooked. So if that's elevated or even on the higher side, mitochondria, but again, you'd have to, there's no like easy, the organic acids testing could look at mitochondria, but I wouldn't say for a beginner, but again, you're the beginner, but you've been having, so again, I'm more conservative when it comes to testing, but if someone has had extreme fatigue for years, I would at least give them options. I would say, well, you could be conservative and just start out with adrenals and, look at nutrients. But you might want to dig deeper. You might want to look at, do an infections panel. Again, not necessarily Cyrix Labs, as someone mentioned earlier, but, look into, I mean, again, viruses, stealth infections, maybe do a comprehensive stool panel. I mean, because again, extreme fatigue for a few weeks or even a few months is not fun, but if it's really bad for years, just yeah, at least consider yeah, and testing for antibodies, that would, yeah, I mean, but you definitely want to go beyond just like the thyroid panel and in my opinion, probably more than the basics in your case. All right, so Drina, I was happy using Thyroid, but it was recalled and none available. Doctor put me on 150 micrograms of levothyroxine and I'm dragging and sleepy. Do you know what's happening with Thyroid? Yeah, so yeah, I've had a few patients have, yeah, so so I think I mean, a few years ago, Nature Thyroid and WP Thyroid have the same manufacturer. So they just like stopped making it. And then I believe they reformulated it because it came back out. And then people were all of a sudden, kind of like with Armor, was reformulated. And when it was reformulated a number of years ago, people, were mentioning that it just wasn't the same. And then, so what nature, yeah, I don't know why it was recalled, if that's what you were asking. So that I'm not sure, I have not like, even if I contacted the company, I probably wouldn't find out. Because again, when this happened, this also happened, like I said, I think it was like a year and a half ago, where pretty much, yeah, they stopped with the Nature Thyroid and WP Thyroid, and nobody really knew what was going on, at least initially. So there are other options. That, I mean, there is Armor, there's NP Thyroid. So if you want to stay on desiccated thyroid, the dosing isn't exactly the same. So, Nature Thyroid and WP Thyroid, again, same manufacturer. So those are the same, but Armor and NP Thyroid, which Armor and NP Thyroid, I believe those are like the same, like not the same manufacturer, but the same like doses, but a little bit different than Nature Thyroid. So yeah, that's a pretty high, I mean, that's a high dose, 150 micrograms of levothyroxine. And of course the problem with levothyroxine with some people, it's synthetic T4. and it has to convert into T3, and not everybody can convert T4 to T3. So yeah, and I know that's not your, you were just asking what's happening with nature thyroid, but maybe look into either another desiccated thyroid. I mean, there's also Cytomel, which, I mean, hopefully your doctor is looking at T3 too, not just looking at TSH or, TSH and free T4, but hopefully your doctor also looks at TSH, free T3, and, free T4 and free T3. And, if you see free T4 normal, free T3 low, then I would either, I mean, you want to try to fix that problem. Usually that's like a liver problem or a gut problem. But if free T3 is low, then you would either want to take something like Cytomel, which is synthetic T3, or maybe switch to a different brand of desiccated thyroid, such as NP thyroid, or again, Armor. All right, so all right, so Geo, I don't think I answered a question from you, but so 10 years of Graves and 2 thyroid storm incidents. Now they want to kill my thyroid. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Geo. That's again, that's what they do. Now, thyroid storm, I mean, not that I agree that I would rush to, but I could understand. And that, I mean, a lot of endocrinologists will rush to radioactive iodine at thyroid surgery, even without thyroid storm. Just the person, maybe sometimes in the first visit, they'll, start pressuring the person. But then, I mean, oftentimes it doesn't take a thyroid storm for them to do that. But, I'm sure, again, they're not comfortable with hyperthyroidism. Not that I'm comfortable, like with, like, I want my patients to, either take Bugle or antithyroid medication. But, um, but yeah, so I guess the big question, have you done anything to address the cause of the problem, or have you just taken the antithyroid medication, and then, maybe you got into remission, but it was temporary, and then you relapsed and went into thyroid storm, and then you were able to go on the medication again, but the same thing happened, and so yeah, it would be, so if you haven't looked into the cause of the problem, then I would. I mean, if, it's been 10 years, so maybe you have worked with some natural healthcare practitioners, and, maybe they didn't find the cause of the problem. And, it's not always easy. I mean, finding, removing triggers. I mean, this is, it can be a challenge, but yeah, you could work with someone else, or, I mean, obviously it's up to you. I mean, just by, the exclamation point, it looks like you don't, you want to avoid surgery, which is the case probably with most people on this call. But there are some people who, after going through 2 thyroid storms, would, decide to get surgery. But yeah, I would, if, so I would say just try to, you know, I mean, if you haven't done so already, of course, try to find, remove triggers, read my book. If you haven't done so, read my articles on my website, maybe consider the upcoming challenge that I'll be having, which, again, I'll probably have more information. Well, almost definitely will have more information next week. I'll have to have the registration information pretty soon, since it's starting in like 2.5 weeks. But yeah, you'll see the testimonials from the success stories from people who attended other 2 challenges. They got a lot of great benefits. So all right, so let's see. This is all right. So it's a private message. I'm going to read the message out loud. I just won't read the person's name. So I developed Graves' disease after years on Hashimoto's this year, literally weeks after they introduced the mask mandates. It stressed me out so much. How do I get better while this world continues to trigger me? It's not easy. I wish I had an easy answer, but the truth is that we're all, I have this conversation, not specifically about, what you're going through, but I have had this conversation, like, as far as 2020 goes, obviously 2020, has been a unique year, but there's always going to be stressors. It's, this, again, one could argue, especially for some people, 2020, has been extremely stressful. But there's other years. I mean, for some people, it hasn't been as stressful. I mean, it's, probably most people, there's been some type of stress. I don't think anybody, enjoys, like, again, I'm not going to get into like the, the mask, but even, so some people don't want to wear masks, some people do want to, don't, I don't think anybody wants to wear a mask, but yeah, like the stress, either way, the stress, nobody likes what's going on, I guess is the point, with the COVID situation. So, just, you're not going to get rid of the stressors anytime soon, but that's the case with a lot of things. If someone's a caretaker for, let's say, aging parents, if someone, again, that sometimes just the condition itself, Graves and Hashimoto's, can cause a lot of stress. Just so that's why I was saying earlier, just we need to be, all of us, it's stress management is always a work in progress. So definitely I recommend for everyone to get in the routine of blocking, of get in a routine of managing stress. Start out with at least 5 minutes per day to block out time for stress management. Just get into that routine. All right. So yeah, so that would be my response to that. It's just, again, it's not, I know it might not be the best answer, but again, there's no great answers, because there's nothing that I could do, that anyone could do, to necessarily get rid of the stressors. Other than, I guess, maybe change careers. I mean, the one thing, I don't really worry too much about it, because I mean, I'm pretty much working remotely. So again, just, but if someone's in a job where they have to wear masks, I guess another option, and if that's really stressing you out, then another option is to try to, I know it's not, you might not find another position as easily, but that is another option to consider. All right, so Maureen, I have Hashimoto's, and I've been searching for my root cause for 3 years. All right, so I've reduced my, TSH is, I think is what you meant, from double digits to 7, and antithyroid globulin from 300 to 5.2. I've eliminated all foods to which I'm sensitive to, and do not take any prescriptions. I have no symptoms presently. However, I'm now at a plateau and need help moving forward. Any suggestions? All right, and then we have Elizabeth. Hey, Elizabeth, right? Hope you're doing good. And yeah, so let's see. So you've been searching for the root cause. So I mean, you're doing some things that are really, really good. So that's yeah. So I mean, it's, the antibodies have dramatically lowered, which is wonderful. And so just something, I mean, obviously something is missing. It could be, a trigger that you're missing, maybe I've eliminated all foods to which I'm sensitive to. So let's say that all foods are, that you've eliminated all food triggers. So there's also, again, there's stress, maybe, that's, chemical that's causing problems. But it also could be the inflammation. So when I did, in August, I did a 5-day, speaking of challenges, I did a 5-day free challenge in August. And one of the topics for one of the days was breaking the chronic inflammatory cycle. So sometimes when we remove the trigger, there's still the chronic inflammation, and we need to do things to break that chronic inflammatory cycle. And so that's, and I think I might have written about that on my website as well. And definitely, if you haven't done so already, check out, not to plug my book, but I'll plug it anyway, Hashimoto's Triggers. It's, again, you can get the Kindle version for $6, but it's really comprehensive, as far as it's comprehensive when it comes to triggers. That's why it's called Hashimoto's Triggers. But I also talk about things about breaking the chronic inflammatory cycle. So you don't have, it's a real big book, but like 500 plus pages, but you don't have to read it from front to back. So but yeah, it's just working. You might have already worked with a natural healthcare practitioner. Again, sometimes even working with a healthcare practitioner could be challenging, but yeah, something to yeah. So yeah, sorry, I'm looking. Yeah, but anyway, just yeah, like I said, I would check out my book, and but you've done a lot of good things. So I mean, that's really good. And yeah, Elizabeth has a question. I don't know if Elizabeth's still on, but asking, was it just the diet as far as the antithyroid globulin? And again, everybody is different. So that's the thing. That's the, I won't say trap some people fall into, but like again, diet for some people is the, like they'll change their diet dramatically and antibodies will normalize or dramatically decrease. But for some people, they'll dramatically change diet and it doesn't make much of a difference. So that's where, different foods. And then, okay, Maureen actually answered Elizabeth. So if you want to look at that, you could see in the comments. So Carol, so did you say testing adrenal using an adrenal saliva test? And oh yeah, so Carol, what I said was either adrenal saliva testing. So I did say that. And then there's something called dry urine testing. So there are two different types of tests. And the reason, so if you're just looking at adrenals, I think adrenal saliva test is fine. That's, I've been using that for years. That's what I used when I was dealing with Graves' disease. Dried urine testing looks at adrenals, and it also looks at sex hormones. And one of the things it looks at that you can't look at really anywhere else is estrogen metabolism, like the estrogen metabolism ratios. It looks at a few other things too, but looks deeper into the hormones than like just you could test hormones obviously in the blood, but you can't look at estrogen metabolism in the blood. Also, gives an idea of methylation, which is a type of phase 2 detoxification. But with saliva testing and dried urine testing, with both of those, you could look at the circadian rhythm of cortisol. So you could collect multiple samples throughout the day because cortisol should be at the highest levels in the morning and gradually decrease at the end of the day. So with with both of those, you're taking multiple samples, and obviously with blood, you can't really. I mean, you can do that, but it's not practical because most people aren't going to go to the lab a few times per day to get a blood draw, and then you wouldn't be able to get an evening blood draw just because the lab usually will close by 5 o'clock. So, but anyway, yeah. So dried urine testing is the other test I was mentioning. So again, one saliva and one urine testing. And let's see. So Marianne, my TSH has been very low, 0.02. Cannot seem to get it up. Is this normal? So it's not normal, but it is common with hyperthyroidism. It's very common for very common for TSH to be depressed for a while. Usually both thyroid hormone levels need to be well within the reference range before TSH budges. And every now and then, even when they are well within the range, they won't budge for a while. It won't budge for a while. But if they're within range, but on the higher side, TSH still usually will stay on the lower side, will still stay depressed. So I don't want to say don't worry about it because obviously we want everything to normalize, but the most important things when looking at thyroid testing. So the levels, the thyroid hormone levels specifically, and the antibodies for those, with Graves' disease. So, if someone, has normal thyroid hormone levels and if someone has normal antibodies, sooner or later the TSH is going to increase. If thyroid hormone levels are normal, but if they're on the higher side, then again, TSH is understandably still going to be depressed. Or even if thyroid hormones, if they're looking really good, but antibodies are high, sometimes that, the TSH sometimes also won't budge. But, so those, again, we want everything to normalize eventually, but, we want the thyroid hormones to be well within the range and antibodies to be normal. So Renee, what specifically helps to convert T4 to T3? So I do have an article on my website where I talk more in detail, but 60% of the conversion takes place in the liver, 20% takes place in the gut. Adrenals, especially higher cortisol, can also affect conversion. If someone has a severe selenium deficiency, That could also affect conversion, but usually it's liver, gut, adrenals are the main causes. All right, NC, what are the tests that you most recommend for determining root causes of Graves' disease? So, I mean, when I was dealing with Graves, I did saliva testing, hair testing, and blood testing. And there's some controversy with hair testing, but it comes down to an interpretation and realizing that it's not a perfect test. But I mean, some people will need a comprehensive stool panel. There's other, so it really does depend on the person. Um, but I would say most common would be adrenal testing, again, either saliva testing or dried urine testing, for years, more so saliva. And then more recently, I'd say still probably more saliva, but I've been doing over the last few years also a decent amount of dried urine testing. And again, hair mineral analysis, blood, some blood testing, and then, sometimes comprehensive stool panel, depends on the person, sometimes organic acids testing. So, so yeah, those would be the more common ones. So Heather says selenium helps to convert T4 to T3. It depends. If someone has a severe selenium deficiency, yeah, that could be a factor. But most of the time, it actually does. I mean, selenium I commonly do recommend, but when it comes to conversion, it can help, but it depends on the person. A lot of times that won't be sufficient. All right, so this is, I don't know if it's meant to be private, and I'll answer this, then I'll go back to YouTube and maybe go back one more time to Zoom and maybe spend another maybe it's like 9:45, we'll call it a night. All right, so so again, I don't know if this person meant to put this private, so I won't say your name, but so I am new to the chat. I have Hashimoto's and was diagnosed 2 years ago. Through diet and supplements, I've been able to normalize most of my levels, but I can't bring down my anti-TPO antibodies. It is currently at 170. So any suggestions? Yeah, so antibodies, and again, it's not always easy. It's it can be definitely challenging, but finding and removing triggers, healing the gut. So again, just I would say definitely start with the basics. So diet. I usually, there's again a lot of controversy over the diet, and the reason is because there's not one diet that fits everybody perfectly. But I usually start people on an autoimmune paleo diet. It's not a perfect diet, and there's some people that just don't do well or don't want to follow it. And I'm not saying it's everybody has to do it or else they won't get into remission. So like I said, it's a starting point, autoimmune paleo. If you're not familiar with that, definitely visit my website. And also Sarah Ballantyne has a lot of information on autoimmune paleo. Again, Sarah Ballantyne. And she has a book, Paleo Approach. It's called Paleo Approach, but it focuses on autoimmune paleo. And stress management also is important, so the basics. But as I mentioned, some testing, someone asked about basic testing. They asked for Graves, but same for Hashimoto's. I mean, adrenal testing, so either adrenal saliva testing or dried urine testing. I like hair mineral analysis tests. Not every practitioner does that. And then sometimes we do need to dig deeper, like a comprehensive stool panel. So we're looking for triggers, looking for underlying imbalances. So, like selenium, for example, if someone has a selenium deficiency won't be a trigger for Hashimoto's, but if someone has a deficiency, it will be really difficult to correct, antibodies, and literature research does show that selenium can help with TPO antibodies, but it depends on the person. If there's other triggers, you got to, find and remove the triggers, and that's why it's ideal to work with a practitioner. Again, I'm not saying it's easy when working with a practitioner, but arguably more difficult when doing it on your own. But also, so I would say starting point, if you're not working with a practitioner, some things you could do on your own for now, again, diet, stress management, visit my website. Again, I have a lot of free articles, and, just, my book, I mean, there's other books on Hashimoto's too. So obviously not just my book, but, I'll plug my book, Hashimoto's Triggers. Maybe also consider the Graves and Hashimoto's challenge I'll be doing in early November. But again, just even before that, I would say just, just clean up diet, stress management. And, if that's not helping, or either way, maybe, read some of the free information if you're still trying to learn about Hashimoto's. And again, my book, or, some other books as well, like Isabella Wentz has a real well-known book on Hashimoto's that I'm sure many people have read on this chat who have Hashimoto's. All right, so let me go to Zoom, to YouTube and see if there are any other questions there. And then I'm going to go another 15 minutes. All right, so Marietta, I'm just going to answer one of your questions just to be fair to the people on Zoom. Just there's not a lot of, wait, oh my God. Actually, someone else, another spam, boy. Why do people have to do this? All right, so actually Jean Marie says, what do you think about acupuncture at Graves? I like acupuncture. I've had acupuncture. Yeah, acupuncture alone probably isn't going to reverse Graves, but I've written an article, so you can check out my website and just do a search for acupuncture, and you'll see the article. But yeah, I think it's not going to hurt. It might help a little bit, but all right. So Marietta, let me see. So you have two questions. Like I said, I will. Actually, I think one is. Let's see. So, can high TPO antibodies and thyroid hormones misbalance cause short gait in a 9-year-old girl? The hormones are normal except the TPO antibody. She got her period when she was 13, has not grown in height much. The thyroid hormone probably not like the imbalance, like the elevated TPO and thyroid hormones. I don't think so, but yeah, something. Could also be, not, well, I guess you could say neurological, like, brain related. There's a good book you might want to check out, Dr. Datis Karazian. He actually has a book on Hashimoto's. It's 2010, 2011, but still an interesting book. But he has a brain book, like that's more recent, like maybe like 3 years old. It's like, why isn't my brain working or something? But Dr. Datis, Datis, Karazian, Kharazzian. I think I'm probably spelling it wrong, but trying to do it in my head. But yeah, so Dr. Datis Karazian, why isn't my brain working, or something like that. If you type it if you just type that into Amazon, you'll probably find it. He also has a book on Hashimoto's, like I said. But yeah, so maybe, yeah, like I said, not the thyroid, but I'm trying to, as far as, I'm going to be biased because I'm a chiropractor, but there's like, I wouldn't say, a regular chiropractor maybe, but there's also chiropractic neurologist. Of course you could bring to a regular neurologist, but my guess that you won't find the answer there. But yeah, and then you also, this I think is a comment, you suspect that we had a hidden mold I suspect that we had a hidden mold problems for several years that were not taken into consideration for her. She has frequent nosebleeds and a lot of blood comes out, can't prove. Yeah, so mold, mold could be pretty nasty. So, you could do a test for mycotoxins, like it's a urine test. So you could have her run that test. And obviously you could test the house for mold too, but you could test the body for mycotoxins, like Great Plains Laboratory. They have a mycotox test. So does Real Time Labs. All right, so Paul, percentage of subclinical hypothyroidism you think can be normalized naturally, role of stress and sleep, antibodies tested within first half of reference range, eliminated gluten and dairy, but not yet legumes. All right, so are you asking the percentage of subclinical hypothyroidism you think can be normalized naturally? I mean, if you're talking about when I think of subclinical, I am thinking of Hashimoto's, so if it's Hashimoto's, and when you say normalized, I wouldn't say necessarily get off, like, again, that's also it's with Hashimoto's, you know, most people, the antibodies, again, it's not easy and it takes time, but most, I'd say, like, 75, 80%, if, I mean, and probably more, just if the problem is, again, like, people, not everybody, it's not easy to make the changes, but so, higher than those numbers for, people would be compliant as far as normalizing the autoimmune component. When it comes to getting off thyroid hormone, if that's what you talk about too, definitely not, that hot, like it's a lower percentage just because the thyroid doesn't regenerate as quick as other areas of the body. So it is possible for some people to get off thyroid hormone or decrease the dose. But yeah, definitely more, greater success of, like, reversing the autoimmune component. And even that is, again, it can be challenging, like I said, sometimes to find remove triggers. And the role of stress and sleep. I mean, adrenals, stress and sleep relate to adrenals, and that definitely could be a factor if you have, unhealthy adrenals. I mean, stress can potentially be a trigger, but also if you have unhealthy adrenals, that's going to drag down the immune system and make it more difficult to recover. Okay, so eliminated gluten and dairy, but not yet legumes. So yeah, I mean, again, just some will say, like Stephen Gundry will say, like, you could have legumes, but you need to, like, pressure cook them, to make them easier on the gut, to, like, to greatly reduce the lectins. But if someone's following autoimmune paleo, then legumes aren't allowed. So again, there's really no agreement when it comes to diet. But all right, so let's go ahead and get back to Zoom for like another 8 minutes or so. So Suma, I don't think I answered a question from you. So Suma, I've been hypothyroid all my life and went to a thyroid seminar with Humana, the HMO. Only thing they recommend is a drug for thyroid for the rest of your life. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that's what yeah, that's their recommendation when it comes, the conventional medicine for, hypothyroidism, they just recommend thyroid hormone replacements. Okay, so Miriam, you recommend, you mentioned corn as a problematic food. How strict should I be? I believe that could be a corn products and things like baking powder, etc. I mean, if someone is trying to get into remission, I recommend being strict with corn. So real, and if you're eating whole foods and not packaged foods, it's a lot easier. If you're eating packaged foods, you definitely got to be careful because there's corn in a lot of things, and a lot of times it's not obvious. So yeah, I mean, not everybody's sensitive, so there might be some people who could get away with corn exposure. I mean, there are people, but it's hard to know what category you fall under. So if someone is not as strict with the diet and then a few months go by and they're not progressing, then that's the first place I'm going to look. So that's why I usually recommend just trying to be strict. If someone doesn't want to do autoimmune paleo strictly, I would say at the very least be gluten, dairy, and corn free. Again, gluten and dairy free is hard enough, and then when you throw in corn, but like I said, it's hard for a lot of people just because they're eating a lot of packaged foods. Again, I'm not saying everybody on this call, but I'm sure some people are. But yeah, so Michelle, is there an amount of selenium you recommend? I mean, a standard is like 200 micrograms, but when I did the interview with Dr. Kasha Kynes, again, it was a few weeks ago when we spoke about Epstein-Barr, and again, not to say everybody needs to take a high dose. She spoke about 600 to 800 micrograms of selenium, which is really high, and I'm nervous about using that high of a dosage because of selenium toxicity. But again, she did open my mind a little bit, and there are times I've had people on 400 micrograms, not common, but if someone has like thyroid eye disease, it might be something to experiment. But again, you still got to be cautious about selenium toxicity. But as I said, she mentioned like she recommends 600 to 800 micrograms to her patients. All right, so Kelly, yeah, so Kelly said 200 to 300. Well, you said milligrams, but I know what you mean. You meant micrograms for selenium. Um, all right, let's see. Again, I'm going to go like 5 minutes. So Shonda, can you take bugleweed and lemon balm safely with antithyroid medicines? Yeah, I mean, I've had, I've had patients on, bugleweed and lemon balm with antithyroid medications and, haven't had a problem. I usually don't tell them to take it at the lemon balm. I usually would just, if not everybody takes lemon balm. I didn't take lemon balm when I was dealing with Graves' disease. And typically it'll be at, like, I'll have someone take it at night. And then bugleweed, I just won't have them take it at the same time as the like if they're taking methimazole. But again, I would say work with a practitioner. So I don't want to say, if you're taking antithyroid medication to also take bugleweed at the same time. I've done it in my practice without a problem. All right, I have 2 thyroid nodules, a breast mass, and fibroids. Is this all due to estrogen dominance? I mean, good chance. Problems with estrogen metabolism, is, yeah. So yeah, I definitely would look at that. And again, that's where the dried urine testing, because again, that looks at estrogen metabolism is really good. All right, so Jennifer, I don't think I answered a question from you tonight. So tested recently high TSH of 5.2. My doctor has asked me to have a TPO antibody test to see if I have Hashimoto's. Number one, is that the right way to test for Hashimoto's? And number two, she said should I have both antibodies test or is TPO adequate? Yeah, so I would test for both. I would say if you're trying to confirm Hashimoto's, test both thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and I would test the antithyroid globulin antibodies. So yeah, I would definitely test both, because if one is negative, the other one could be positive. And like if you did TPO antibodies and that was negative, and if thyroid globulin antibodies were positive, but you didn't test for them, so you didn't know they were positive, then that you'd want to know that, and vice versa. So yeah, I would say test both. All right, so all right, Catherine, can you really heal completely? So as I mentioned, like when, if you talk about cure, permanent cure, so I don't like using the word cure, but, I feel like I'm cured. I like using permanent remission as what, and again, there's no guarantee even with me, it's permanent, but again, yeah, can someone, be symptom free, thyroid numbers normal, including antibodies? Yes. Is it easy? No, it's definitely not easy. All right, Allison, I don't think I answered a question from you. So history of Graves' disease, methimazole, T3, T4, TSH, and TSI now. I'm not sure what that is. With the normal limits for 5 years, is that? Okay, I guess that's what you're saying. So I'm not sure if, oh, okay. Okay. So but thyroid eye disease persists. Anything I can do about that? Huh, that's okay. So TSI is with a normal limit. That's kind of unusual. So TSI is normal, but thyroid eye disease I'm wondering if that's a true negative, if you're still having thyroid eye disease symptoms. Um, I mean, I mean, it's not as common, but even people with Hashimoto's can have thyroid eye disease. but usually it's due to those TSI. So either way, immune system I would focus on, so something is missing, and I would just, again, go down the list, like food, are you following strict, or have you followed a strict autoimmune paleo diet, for example? Are you doing things to block out, are you blocking out time for stress management? Have you done testing for adrenals? Look into, again, the 4 categories of triggers I mentioned in previous, chat. So again, food, stress, chemical, infection. Again, not easy, but not always easy to find out these imbalances. Again, nutrient deficiencies too. Again, not triggers, but that's why sometimes you'll hear me say, find or remove triggers, heal the gut, correct underlying imbalances. Like a nutrient deficiency is an underlying imbalance, not a trigger, but it's still important. So. All right. So again, I know. Okay, Dr. Eric, you mentioned in your blog that someone with Hashimoto's is more susceptible to COVID. Do you recommend getting the vaccine when it's available? If not, what do you recommend we should do to prevent from getting this virus? Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah. Another. Yeah. So I'll say with COVID, I'm not going to talk about other vaccines. I'm just about done now anyway. But I will say COVID. The big thing with COVID is it's like if they come out with it soon, it's really fast that they're coming out with it. So, so I know I don't plan on getting the COVID vaccine, but as far as recommending to my patients, I mean, obviously it's up to the patient. So like my father is, he's going on 83. He definitely does not have a natural mindset, and he plans on getting the vaccine like when it comes out. So, and I told him, just you might want to wait, just not get, if you're going to get it, just not get it right away. So, I mean, so I'll say that. Like I said, I really don't want to get into, I mean, because again, there's so much division these days with people arguing with everything, politics and vaccines and all that. So, but it's a good question. I know that's not why you're bringing it up. It's but as far as what should we do to prevent from getting the virus? I mean, do things to improve immune system health. I'm actually tomorrow, it's funny you asked, tomorrow I'm having 2 p.m. a Facebook Live, 7 things you could do to improve your immune system health. So, I would say, go attend that, or, I could, I'm going to upload it. Once I'm done with it, I will upload it to YouTube, naturalthyroid.com. And it might not show up. I mean, it might not be uploaded until like Saturday, but yeah, so check that out. I've also written articles too, but I would just, continue to do things to work on immune system health, is what I would say. But obviously that's, it's up to you. All right. So I am going to call it a night just because it's almost 10 o'clock here, but I'll do some other ones. I'm not sure when, but you'll, again, just like this one, you'll get an email. And again, on Facebook, if anybody is on Facebook, feel free to pop in tomorrow at either the Facebook group or my page. It'll be live streaming to pretty much my group, and then two of my main pages. And like I said, I'll upload it to YouTube. So for those who are not on Facebook, if you want to watch a recording, you could check that out. And again, I'll do another one. Yeah, I'm not sure as far as, like I said, when, just yeah, maybe next Saturday, depending on my, not this coming Saturday, because I do have something going on, but possibly the next Saturday or an evening during the week, like I did here. So all right, well, hope everyone has a wonderful night. Thank you, or a wonderful day if anybody's in Australia, a good day ahead. But but thanks everyone for attending and for your questions. I appreciate it. Hope everybody has a wonderful night. And yeah, like I said, I'll be doing another one soon, and you'll hear from me. Just check your email. So all right, take care, everyone. Have a great night.